The blood was still wet on the kitchen floor when Marcus Hale walked through the front door, and the first thing he saw was his sister's wedding ring lying beside a broken glass. The second thing he saw was the police chief standing behind him, telling a uniformed officer to photograph the room from the wrong angle. Marcus stopped breathing for a moment, his ears filled with a dull ringing. The house smelled of rain, cold coffee, and something metallic that made his stomach tighten. His sister, Rachel Hale, was gone. Her body had been found less than an hour earlier. Her husband, Ethan Cross, was sitting against the wall in the hallway with blood on his shirt and a blank expression in his eyes. Chief Daniel Mercer stood in the doorway as if he owned the scene. "I'm sorry," Mercer said. "This looks like a domestic incident." Marcus looked at Ethan. "What happened?" Ethan didn't answer. He stared at Rachel's wedding ring on the floor. Then Marcus noticed something that didn't fit. Rachel's purse was open, but nothing had been taken. Her phone was missing. The back door was locked from the inside. A window beside the kitchen had been shattered, but the glass was lying mostly outside. Marcus looked at Chief Mercer again. "Domestic incident?" Mercer nodded. "That's our working theory." "Working theory," Marcus repeated. "You've been here 20 minutes. Mercer's eyes hardened. "We have experience with these situations." Marcus had heard that tone before, but not from a police chief. He had heard it from people who believed uniforms made questions unnecessary. What Mercer didn't know was that Marcus had spent 12 years working in military intelligence before leaving the service. He knew crime scenes weren't puzzles solved by instinct. They were timelines, movements, contradictions. Missing objects, human behavior, and Rachel's house was full of contradictions. Ethan finally spoke. "She called me at 8:14, his voice cracked. "She said someone was outside." Marcus crouched beside him. "Who?" "She didn't know." "What happened next?" Ethan looked toward the hallway. "I drove here. I found her." Marcus looked at Mercer's officers. None of them were taking notes. One officer, Sergeant Nolan Price, was standing beside Rachel's desk, touching documents with bare hands. Marcus felt something cold settle behind his ribs. "Where's her phone?" he asked. Mercer answered too quickly. "Probably taken as evidence." "By whom?" Silence. Marcus stood. "Where is the evidence log?" Mercer stepped closer. "Marcus, you're upset. I'm asking where the evidence log is. We'll handle the investigation." Marcus looked at the chief's badge, then at the blood on the floor, then at Ethan. Something was wrong. Not slightly wrong. Fundamentally wrong. A murder scene was being cleaned before the investigation had even started. Marcus called his former military contact, Colonel James Rourke, and said only 4 words. "I need you now." Rourke didn't ask why. He had known Marcus long enough to recognize danger in his voice. But before Marcus could say anything else, Chief Mercer ordered everyone out of the kitchen. Marcus stepped backward. His eyes settled on a small dark smear beneath the dining table. It looked like blood, but the direction of the smear made no sense if Rachel had been attacked where the body was found. Someone had moved something. Maybe someone had moved her. Maybe someone had moved the entire story. And Marcus suddenly realized the most terrifying possibility wasn't that Rachel had been murdered. It was that the police chief had arrived, knowing exactly what he intended to find. The next morning, Chief Mercer held a press conference before Rachel's family had even received the complete autopsy report. Cameras crowded outside the station, while Mercer announced that investigators had strong reason to believe Rachel's death resulted from a confrontation with her husband. Ethan had already been detained for questioning. The chief described him as a person of interest and repeatedly emphasized that there had been marital tension. Marcus watched the broadcast from his mother's living room with his fists clenched. Rachel and Ethan had been married for 4 years. They had argued like any couple, but Rachel had never been afraid of Ethan. She had called Marcus 2 nights earlier and complained about a strange car parked outside her house. She had even laughed when she said it. "Probably someone lost," she had told him. "I'll tell you if the car comes back." Now Mercer was turning that ordinary conversation into a motive. Marcus replayed the interview in his mind. Mercer knew too much. He knew about the supposed argument. He knew Rachel's estimated time of death. He knew where Ethan had been standing when officers arrived, but the forensic report wasn't complete. That meant either someone had given Mercer unauthorized information or the chief had been present before the official response. Marcus called Colonel Rourke again. "Can you help me understand something?" he asked. Rourke answered, "What? How does a police chief know details before the evidence exists?" There was silence. "He shouldn't," Rourke said. That afternoon, Marcus met Ethan's attorney, Laura Bennett. She was sharp, direct, and clearly frustrated. She showed Marcus the preliminary documents. Ethan's fingerprints were everywhere in the house, which wasn't surprising. He lived there. But there was something strange about the phone record. Rachel had called Ethan at 8:14. The call lasted 19 seconds. Then her phone went offline. Ethan's phone showed that he had arrived at the house at 8:31, but a neighborhood camera captured his car arriving at 8:37. 6 minutes mattered. Marcus asked why. Laura said, "Because the prosecution's timeline depends on him being there earlier." Marcus studied the footage. The camera angle showed Ethan's vehicle clearly, no ambiguity. He had not been there when the prosecution suggested Rachel died. Then another detail emerged. Rachel's smartwatch had recorded a sudden increase in heart rate at 8:16, followed by movement through the house. The device had been removed from her wrist after that. It was found inside a drawer, not on the floor. Marcus stared at the report. Who moved the watch? Laura didn't know. Marcus asked for the original evidence inventory. Laura hesitated. The police haven't provided it. That was enough. Marcus called Colonel Rourke one more time. Rourke arrived that evening in an ordinary sedan. He examined the documents without touching them unnecessarily. He listened while Marcus explained the timeline. Then he asked one question. "Did Rachel ever tell you what she did for work?" Marcus nodded. "She worked for a regional logistics company." Rourke looked at the name. "And what exactly did the company move?" Marcus checked. "Medical equipment, electronic components, specialized industrial materials." Rourke's expression changed. "Interesting." Marcus asked what he meant. "Nothing yet." He turned another page. There was a list of Rachel's recent contacts. One name appeared repeatedly. A man named Victor Sloan. Marcus recognized him. Sloan was a city procurement officer. He had worked closely with Chief Mercer. Marcus felt the room grow colder. "Why would my sister be talking to him?" Rourke asked. Marcus didn't know. Then Laura received an email from an anonymous sender containing a single sentence. Rachel found something she wasn't supposed to find. There was no signature, no attachment, no explanation. Marcus stared at the message. Rourke leaned closer. Now we have a motive. But whose motive remained the question. 3 days after Rachel's death, the police announced that they had recovered what they called critical evidence from Ethan's vehicle. A dark jacket allegedly containing traces of Rachel's blood. The announcement spread across local news within hours. Marcus knew immediately that something was wrong. Ethan had been wearing a different jacket when officers arrived. He had told Laura that his jacket had been left at Rachel's house. Yet the police claimed they found it in his trunk. Marcus asked Laura whether the evidence had been tested independently. She said the department had refused to release the sample. Marcus didn't argue. He called Rourke. "They're building a case around him." Rourke replied. "Then stop watching the case. Start watching the people building it." That became the turning point. Marcus began mapping every person connected to Rachel's final week. Chief Daniel Mercer, Sergeant Nolan Price, Procurement Officer Victor Sloan, Detective Karen Voss, Medical Logistics Executive Andrew Bell, and a private security contractor named Grant Keller. The names formed a pattern. Rachel's company had recently discovered irregular shipments of medical equipment. Items were disappearing from warehouses and reappearing under different invoices. Rachel had apparently noticed that the numbers didn't match. She had told a coworker that someone was using legitimate shipping records to move unauthorized material. Marcus tracked down the coworker, Emily Hart. She was terrified. At first she refused to speak. Then she handed Marcus a notebook Rachel had kept at work. Rachel had written dates, vehicle numbers, invoice codes, and initials. One set of initials appeared again and again. D.M. Marcus stared at the page. Daniel Mercer. But there was something even more disturbing. Several shipments had been authorized through the city procurement office under Victor Sloan, the same office that had exchanged messages with Rachel shortly before her death. Marcus asked Emily when Rachel had last seemed afraid. Emily answered, "The day before she died." "Why?" She said someone had followed her. Marcus asked whether she reported it. Emily shook her head. She said she didn't trust the police. That sentence hit harder than anything else. Rachel had apparently suspected the police were involved before she died. Marcus took the notebook to Laura. She immediately recognized its significance. But motive wasn't enough. They needed evidence connecting Mercer to the murder. Rourke told Marcus to slow down. "You have one advantage," he said. "They think you're emotional." Marcus looked at him. "I am emotional." Rourke nodded. "Good. Just don't let them make decisions for you." They began documenting everything legally. Every communication, every inconsistency, every missing record. Laura requested the original crime scene photographs. The department provided copies, but several images had metadata showing they had been exported 2 days after the murder. That shouldn't have happened. The original files were supposedly preserved the night of the crime. Laura filed a preservation demand. Mercer ignored it. Then Detective Karen Voss contacted Laura privately. She said she wanted to meet. They chose a public location. Voss arrived without her badge. She looked exhausted. She told Marcus that Mercer had ordered her to remove several items from Rachel's home before the scene was processed. Marcus asked what items. Voss swallowed hard. A laptop, a flash drive, and Rachel's phone. Marcus's heartbeat accelerated. "Where are they?" Voss looked around. "I don't know. You removed them." "I was ordered to, by Mercer." She nodded. Then she said something that changed everything. "But I didn't take the phone." Marcus stared at her. "Who did?" Voss looked toward the window. "Sergeant Price." And suddenly, the missing phone became more important than the jacket, the blood, or the altered timeline. Rachel's phone was eventually located through a backup service. Marcus didn't know whether to feel relieved or afraid when the technician recovered its contents. There were hundreds of messages, dozens of photographs, and one encrypted folder. The folder had been created 2 days before Rachel died. Laura sent the device to a digital forensic specialist. The specialist found a hidden audio file. It contained Rachel's voice. She was speaking quietly, almost whispering. "If you're hearing this, something happened to me. I don't know who I can trust. I've been tracking shipments that don't belong in our system. The records point toward the city procurement office, but I think someone inside the police department is protecting them." Marcus closed his eyes. Hearing his sister's voice made the room feel unbearably small. Rachel continued. "She mentioned Mercer. She mentioned Sloan. She mentioned a shipment scheduled for the following week. Then she said one name Marcus didn't recognize, Adrian Vale." The recording ended. The forensic specialist explained that the file had been created automatically as part of a scheduled backup, which meant Rachel had planned for someone to find it. Marcus asked who Adrian Vale was. Rourke began searching. The name belonged to a private defense contractor who had previously worked with federal agencies. He had no obvious connection to Rachel's company, but his company had received several city contracts through Sloan. The money trail was becoming clearer. Medical equipment was being diverted. Procurement officials were authorizing fake shipments. Private contractors were moving the goods. Police officials were suppressing complaints. Rachel had discovered the system and started documenting it. Her murder could have been an attempt to erase the evidence. Marcus wanted to confront Mercer immediately. Rourke stopped him. "No, he killed her. You don't know that yet." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You heard the recording. I heard suspicion. We need proof." That distinction kept Marcus from making a mistake. Instead, Laura petitioned for an independent investigation. The request was denied by the county prosecutor, Michael Grant, who happened to have worked with Mercer for 15 years. That denial created another contradiction. Grant claimed there was insufficient evidence to question the police department's handling of the case, but he had not requested the recovered phone. He had not reviewed the original crime scene metadata. He had not interviewed Detective Voss. The investigation was being blocked from multiple directions. Then something unexpected happened. A federal inspector named Rebecca Shaw contacted Laura. She said her office had noticed irregularities in city procurement records. Several contracts had been flagged for review months earlier. One of the companies involved was Adrian Vale's. Shaw wanted Rachel's notes. Laura agreed to provide them. Within 48 hours, federal investigators opened a formal inquiry into the Procurement Network. Mercer immediately issued a statement calling the investigation politically motivated. Marcus watched the press conference and saw something in Mercer's eyes. Not confidence, fear. The chief was no longer controlling the story, and that was when he made his biggest mistake. He publicly accused Ethan Cross of killing Rachel. The accusation was reckless because the federal investigators now had access to the same evidence. Their analysts compared the timeline and found that Ethan's phone had connected to a tower 12 miles away at the estimated time of Rachel's death. The jacket evidence also contained contamination inconsistent with the scene. The prosecution's case was collapsing, but Marcus knew a collapsing case could make dangerous people desperate, and someone had already tried to kill the truth once. The first attempt to intimidate Marcus came at night. He was leaving Laura's office when a black sedan accelerated toward him. He stepped backward as the vehicle jumped the curb. The car missed him by inches and disappeared into traffic. Marcus stood frozen beneath a streetlight, breathing hard. He didn't chase it, he called the police. Then he called Rourke. "They know we're close," he said. Rourke replied, "They knew before you started." The incident was captured on a nearby security camera. The plate was obscured, but investigators traced the vehicle to a company associated with Grant Keller. Keller was the private contractor linked to the procurement shipments. The next morning, Detective Voss turned over another piece of evidence. She had kept a copy of a dispatch log showing Mercer arrived at Rachel's house 14 minutes before the first patrol unit. That was impossible according to the official timeline. Mercer had claimed he was informed after officers arrived. The dispatch record proved otherwise. He had been there first. Marcus looked at the timestamp and felt the pieces locked together. Mercer hadn't simply covered up the murder afterward. He may have been present before anyone else. But presence wasn't proof of murder. Laura needed more. Federal investigators interviewed Voss. They subpoenaed Mercer's phone records. Those records showed a series of calls to Adrian Vale on the night Rachel died. The calls occurred before and after the estimated time of death. There was also a call to Victor Sloan, then another to Grant Keller. The network was tightening. Investigators searched a warehouse connected to Keller. They found boxes matching Rachel's shipment records. Some contained medical devices reported as missing. Others contained equipment that had never been properly documented. More importantly, they found Rachel's laptop. It had been hidden inside a locked office. Digital specialists recovered deleted files. One folder contained photographs Rachel had taken inside a warehouse. In the images, Mercer was visible speaking with Keller. Another photograph showed Sloan handing an envelope to Mercer. The date was 3 days before Rachel died. Marcus stared at the image. "That's him," Rourke nodded. "Now you have something." But there was still no direct proof that Mercer had killed Rachel. Then investigators found a surveillance video from a gas station near Rachel's neighborhood. A city vehicle passed the station at 8:02 p.m. The driver was Mercer. The vehicle disappeared from the city tracking system for 27 minutes. At 8:29, it reappeared 3 blocks from Rachel's house. The timing was devastating. Mercer had lied about his whereabouts, but the most important evidence came from Rachel herself. The recovered audio file contained another hidden segment. It had been buried inside a digital folder. Rachel said, "If Daniel Mercer is involved, look for the Blue Ledger." Marcus recognized the name. The Blue Ledger had never been found. Investigators searched Rachel's home again. Nothing. They searched her workplace. Nothing. They questioned Emily. She didn't know. Then Ethan remembered something. Rachel had once told him she kept important things where nobody looks. Marcus asked what she meant. Ethan said Rachel loved old books. They checked a shelf in her office. One volume was thicker than the others. Inside was a hollow compartment. The Blue Ledger was there. It contained handwritten records linking payments, shipments, vehicle numbers, and names. At the final page, Rachel had written one sentence: "If they hurt me, don't trust the police." Marcus felt his throat tighten. Rachel had known. She had known the people who were supposed to protect her might be the people she needed protection from. Now the question wasn't whether Mercer was corrupt, it was whether he had personally ordered Rachel's death. The federal investigation moved faster after the ledger was recovered. Rebecca Shaw presented the evidence to a special prosecutor, Daniel Pierce, who had no connection to the county. Pierce reviewed the files personally. He studied the timeline, the surveillance footage, the phone records, the procurement documents, and Rachel's notes. Then he asked to meet Marcus and Ethan. The meeting was quiet. Pierce explained that they had enough evidence to pursue charges related to corruption, obstruction, evidence tampering, and conspiracy. But murder required a stronger chain. They needed to establish that Mercer either committed the killing or knowingly ordered it. Marcus asked what would happen if they couldn't. Pierce answered, "Then we keep investigating." That wasn't the answer Marcus wanted, but it was the answer he trusted. Meanwhile, Mercer began unraveling. He accused federal investigators of harassment. He claimed Rachel had been involved in financial misconduct. He tried to discredit Ethan again. But every statement created another contradiction. Investigators discovered that Mercer had contacted a private investigator shortly after Rachel's death. The investigator had been hired to monitor Marcus. Why? Mercer claimed he wanted to know whether the family posed a threat to the investigation. But the investigator's records showed something else. Mercer had asked for information about Rachel's missing phone and the blue ledger. That meant he knew those items existed. He shouldn't have known. The ledger had never been publicly mentioned. Marcus realized the significance immediately. Someone told him, Pierce nodded, or he was there when it was made. Then the forensic team found a partial fingerprint on the inside cover of the blue ledger. It belonged to Mercer. That alone didn't prove murder because he could have handled the ledger later. But investigators traced when the fingerprint had been deposited. The laboratory could establish that the print was beneath a later layer of residue, suggesting Mercer had touched the ledger before it had been stored in Rachel's office. The evidence was becoming overwhelming. Then Detective Voss revealed the final missing piece. She had recorded a conversation with Mercer 2 days after Rachel died. In the recording, Mercer said, "The woman had to be stopped before she exposed everything." Voss asked, "What about the husband?" Mercer replied, "He'll take the fall." Marcus listened to the recording 3 times. He felt anger, grief, and relief colliding inside him. Rachel had been telling the truth. Ethan had been framed. Mercer had been protecting the network. But the recording still didn't contain an explicit admission of murder. Pierce wanted more. They searched the city vehicle logs. One vehicle assigned to Mercer had been taken to a private repair facility the morning after Rachel's death. The mechanic, Owen Price, came forward. He said Mercer had ordered him to clean the interior of the vehicle. Owen remembered seeing a dark stain on the rear floor. He had been told it was animal blood. He didn't believe that. He had kept the cleaning receipt. The receipt showed the service occurred at 9:14 a.m., hours after the murder. Investigators collected a sample from the vehicle's hidden carpet seam. The laboratory found traces consistent with Rachel's blood. Suddenly, the case changed. Mercer had been in the vehicle. Rachel's blood was in the vehicle. He had lied about being near the scene. He had tried to control the investigation. He had monitored the family. And he had been recorded discussing how Rachel had to be stopped. But one final question remained. Who actually pulled the trigger? The answer came from an unexpected source. Grant Keller's assistant, Melissa Crane, contacted federal investigators after Keller threatened her. She had access to scheduling records and private communications. She provided a calendar entry from the night Rachel died. It showed Keller meeting Mercer at 7:41 p.m., then another appointment at 8:05 p.m., with a person listed only as R. Investigators determined the person was former Detective Richard Nolan, a retired officer who still worked as a private security consultant for Keller. Nolan had been seen near Rachel's neighborhood that night. His vehicle appeared on a traffic camera. Investigators searched his home and found a firearm registered to a private security company. Ballistics testing linked the weapon to the projectile recovered from Rachel's body. Nolan was arrested. Under questioning, he initially denied everything. Then prosecutors showed him the evidence. He admitted being at the house. He claimed Mercer ordered him to frighten Rachel into surrendering the documents, but he said the confrontation went wrong. Rachel resisted. Nolan panicked. He fired. Then Mercer arrived. According to Nolan, Mercer didn't call for emergency assistance. Instead, he took Rachel's phone, removed the blue ledger from her office, and instructed Nolan to make the scene look like a domestic dispute. Ethan had become the perfect suspect because he was Rachel's husband and because the department could manipulate the evidence. Nolan said Mercer promised to protect him. The confession finally connected the entire chain. Rachel had been killed because she discovered the procurement scheme. Nolan had carried out the confrontation. Mercer had arrived afterward, helped conceal the evidence, and directed the cover-up. He then used his authority to frame Ethan. The murder wasn't random. It was a calculated attempt to protect a network worth millions. When Marcus heard the confession, he didn't feel victorious. He felt hollow. Nothing could bring Rachel back. No arrest could undo the last moments of her life. No conviction could erase the image of her wedding ring on the kitchen floor. But truth mattered. It mattered to Ethan, who had spent weeks being treated like a murderer. It mattered to their mother, who had refused to believe the police narrative, and it mattered to Rachel, because she had left behind evidence knowing she might not survive. Chief Mercer was arrested at his home before dawn. Federal agents entered with a warrant. He was handcuffed without drama. There were cameras outside. Reporters shouted questions. Mercer said nothing. As he was escorted away, Marcus stood across the street. Their eyes met for a second. Marcus expected anger. Instead, he saw something else. Mercer looked afraid. Not of Marcus, not of the cameras, of the evidence. The thing he had spent weeks trying to control was finally beyond his reach. The case went to trial months later. Nolan pleaded guilty and testified. Keller faced separate charges. Sloan cooperated with prosecutors. Victor Vale's company was dismantled. Several officials resigned. Ethan was formally cleared. Rachel's name was entered into the court record, not as a suspect or victim of domestic violence, but as the whistleblower whose evidence exposed the network. When the verdict was read, Marcus held his mother's hand. Guilty, guilty, guilty. Each word landed heavily. His mother cried quietly. Ethan stared at the floor. Marcus looked toward the empty chair where Rachel should have been, and for the first time since the murder, he allowed himself to grieve without having to fight. After the trial, Marcus returned to Rachel's house alone. The police tape was gone, the broken window had been repaired, the kitchen floor had been replaced, but memory doesn't disappear when evidence is removed. He stood where her wedding ring had fallen and closed his eyes. He could almost hear her laughing about the strange car outside. He could almost hear her telling him not to worry. That was the cruelest part. She had trusted that life would continue normally. She had believed she had time. She had believed telling the truth would matter, and she was right. It just took longer than she deserved. Ethan eventually moved out of the house. He kept Rachel's wedding ring in a small wooden box. Marcus visited him often. Their grief was different, but neither had to explain it. They had both lost someone they loved. One evening, Ethan asked Marcus why he had refused to confront Mercer directly. Marcus thought about it. Because Rachel deserved justice, not another tragedy. Ethan nodded. She would have said that. Colonel Rourke had remained mostly in the background throughout the investigation. He never encouraged Marcus to become an avenger. Instead, he taught him to remain patient, preserve evidence, and let professionals build the case. When Marcus thanked him, Rourke said, "You did the hardest part." Marcus shook his head. "What was that?" "You stayed human." That sentence stayed with him, because the easiest thing after losing Rachel would have been to let hatred take control. There were nights when Marcus imagined confronting Mercer. There were moments when he wanted the chief to feel the same fear Rachel must have felt, but he understood something important. Revenge would have ended with another broken family. Justice ended with the truth exposed and the people responsible unable to hurt anyone else. Months later, the city created an independent review board for police misconduct. The procurement department underwent a complete audit. Several contracts were canceled. Citizens who had filed complaints against the department were invited to testify. Rachel's case became a turning point. Not because she was the only victim, but because her evidence revealed how easily power could hide behind procedure. The department had used forms, badges, reports, and official language to make lies sound legitimate. But every lie had a weakness: a timestamp, a camera, a missing phone, a fingerprint, a witness, a receipt. Rachel understood that before anyone else did. She had created a trail. Marcus simply followed it. 1 year after the verdict, the family gathered at a small park overlooking the river. Rachel's mother brought flowers. Ethan brought the wooden box containing the wedding ring. Marcus brought Rachel's notebook. They didn't hold a ceremony. They simply sat together. Her mother finally said, "I wish she could see this." Marcus looked across the water. "Maybe she can see what we became." Nobody answered. The silence was enough. Rachel had been murdered, but she hadn't been erased. Her name remained in the court record. Her evidence remained in the archive. Her story remained in the people who loved her, and her courage had changed a city. Marcus realized that was the final lesson. A person can be silenced without being forgotten. A crime can be hidden for a while without being hidden forever, and authority can suppress a story, but it cannot guarantee that every witness will remain silent. The police chief had believed he controlled the narrative. He controlled reports. He controlled officers. He controlled access to the crime scene. But he couldn't control Rachel's preparation. He couldn't control the camera footage. He couldn't control the federal investigators. He couldn't control Detective Voss's conscience. And he couldn't control Marcus once Marcus stopped reacting emotionally and started following the evidence. 2 years after Rachel's murder, Marcus stood in a courtroom again, but this time he wasn't there for a trial. He was there for the unveiling of a public memorial honoring victims whose cases had been mishandled. Rachel's name was among them. Her photograph showed her smiling, hair blowing across her face, one hand raised as if she were telling whoever took the picture to stop. Marcus smiled when he saw it. That was Rachel, not the woman in the crime scene photographs, not the name in the police report, not the victim in the courtroom, his sister, the woman who called him when she needed advice, the woman who sent him ridiculous birthday messages, the woman who once stole his jacket because she said hers was ugly. That was the person he wanted remembered. After the ceremony, a young detective approached him. Her name was Maya Ellis. She said she had joined the department because of Rachel's case. I wanted to be the kind of officer she should have had that night, Maya said. Marcus thanked her. Then she asked him something he wasn't expecting. Do you hate the police? Marcus thought for a moment. No. Even after what happened? I hate what people do when they believe a badge makes them untouchable, Maya nodded. Marcus continued. But a badge doesn't make everyone the same. He told her about Detective Voss, the officers who eventually cooperated, the investigators who followed the evidence, and the people who refused to let the case disappear. Institutions aren't moral, he said. People are. Maya wrote that down. Marcus wondered whether Rachel would have liked her. Probably. Rachel had always believed people could choose better. That belief had cost her everything, but it had also become part of the reason her killer was caught. Later that evening, Marcus visited Ethan. They sat outside as the sun disappeared behind the trees. Ethan asked whether Marcus ever thought about what might have happened if Rachel hadn't left the recording. Marcus answered honestly. Every day. Ethan nodded. She knew. She did. She prepared. She did. They sat quietly. Then Ethan looked at Marcus. You know what I remember most? Marcus asked. What? The last normal day. Marcus smiled sadly. Me too. That was the strange thing about grief. You remember the ordinary moments more sharply than the tragedy. Rachel eating breakfast. Rachel complaining about traffic. Rachel sending a picture of a dog she wanted to adopt. Rachel laughing at something nobody else found funny. The murder became one moment. Her life was thousands. Marcus decided that was how he would remember her. Not as the sister who died, as the sister who lived. And that became the final victory. Mercer had wanted Rachel's story reduced to a convenient explanation. He wanted Ethan labeled a murderer. He wanted the evidence buried. He wanted everyone to move on. Instead, the truth became larger than the cover-up. Rachel's name became associated with accountability. Ethan rebuilt his life. Detective Voss found a new career outside the department. Marcus returned to a quieter life, carrying the lessons of his intelligence years without allowing them to consume him. Colonel Rourke retired fully. Sometimes they still spoke. Rourke would ask, "How's the family?" Marcus would answer, "Healing." That was the honest word. Not healed, healing, because justice doesn't erase grief. It gives grief somewhere to stand. I used to think justice was about the moment the guilty person was punished. I was wrong. Justice is everything that happens before that moment. The courage to preserve evidence, the discipline to wait, the willingness to question an official story, the strength to protect witnesses, the patience to let facts survive long enough to be heard. Rachel's murder taught me that the truth is often fragile at first. It can be buried under paperwork. It can be drowned out by headlines. It can be attacked by people with authority. But if enough people protect it, eventually it becomes stronger than the people trying to hide it. Chief Mercer had a badge, a department, loyal officers, political connections, and access to information. Marcus had a notebook, a few memories, and a sister he refused to let become a convenient statistic. In the end, the notebook mattered more, the memories mattered more, Rachel's voice mattered more, and the evidence mattered most of all. If you're wondering why Marcus never took revenge himself, the answer is simple. Rachel had already lost one life because someone believed violence could solve a problem. Marcus wasn't going to create another tragedy in her name. He wanted the truth to stand in court. He wanted Ethan's name cleared. He wanted the system that had been corrupted to be forced to confront what it had become. And he wanted Rachel remembered as a person, not a case file. That is what happened. It wasn't fast. It wasn't clean. It wasn't cinematic. It was harder. It was paperwork, interviews, evidence requests, long nights, painful memories, and people choosing courage when silence would have been easier. But it worked. The chief who thought he could control the investigation lost control of the truth. The detective who had obeyed orders found the courage to speak. The contractor who believed money could buy silence discovered that records have memories. The officer who pulled the trigger discovered that fear cannot erase evidence. And the family that had been told to accept a false story refused. Rachel's story ended with accountability, but her legacy continues with every person who now understands that authority must always be questioned when the evidence doesn't make sense. So, if you ever find yourself hearing a story that seems too convenient, look closer. If someone tells you there is only one explanation, ask what evidence supports it. If a powerful person demands silence, remember that silence is not proof. And if you're ever tempted to let anger decide your next move, remember Marcus Hale standing outside that courthouse, knowing exactly what he could have done, and choosing something harder. He chose restraint. He chose evidence. He chose justice. And because he did, Rachel's final message was heard. If you're hearing this, something happened to me. Someone heard her, someone believed her, someone followed the trail, and in the end, the truth spoke louder than the badge that tried to bury it. Where are you watching from? Comment your city or country below. What kind of story do you want next? Military revenge, psychological thriller, or emotional family justice? And here's the question I want you to debate. If you were in Marcus's shoes, knowing the police chief had covered up your sister's murder, would you have waited for the legal system to expose him, or would the anger have pushed you toward taking justice into your own hands? Think carefully, because this story isn't really about revenge. It's about what we become when someone we love is taken from us. Sometimes strength is striking back. Sometimes strength is refusing to become another victim of the same darkness. Rachel deserved justice, Ethan deserved the truth, and Marcus chose a path that gave them both. Thank you for listening. Stay safe, stay strong, protect the people you love, and I'll see you in the next story.
पहले तो बच्चों ने इसको कंफ्यूज किया जब बैट्स होगी तो फिर इसने बच्चों को कंफ्यूज
सही है।
ये बच्चे ना चार पाई के ऊपर बैठे हो डर के मारे।
अच्छा क्या हुआ? हाँ carry on Tokyo. Keep. पकड़ो। Hello, Tokyo. This is my cat playing with me.